Hi, my name is Dr. Brian Skotko. I'm the Emma Campbell Endowed Chair on Down Syndrome at Massachusetts General Hospital in Boston, Massachusetts in the United States. I'm also an associate professor at Harvard Medical School. I am so grateful you're joining me today for my talk called Brain Train, Smart Actions That Might Boost Cognition and Prevent Alzheimer's Disease in People with Down Syndrome. First and foremost, I want to say what this presentation is not. This is not a presentation on about how best to educate people with Down syndrome. For the latest advances in educational pedagogy, I recommend you checking out this website from Down Syndrome Education International. This is also not a presentation on supplements or nutraceuticals. If you would like some of my thoughts and my backgrounds, check out my interview at this website right here. I also want to point out, however, that many of the vitamins and nutraceuticals that claim to have benefits for boosting cognition or preventing Alzheimer's disease have actually ended up being fraudulent. And within our own country, our Food and Drug Administration has taken activity against some illegally selling products. So just be careful. Those that are out there on the shelf that claim to boost cognition and prevent Alzheimer's might not actually be safe to do so. But I am not going to be covering supplements and nutraceuticals in this particular presentation. So what am I presenting? I wanted to make sure that what I present today meets 5 stringent criteria that I imposed on myself. Anything that I'm about to talk about, I want to make sure is supported in part by quality science. There is a research study out there. I want to make sure it has practical implications. It might be a study on mice, but if that has no practical implications for us right now, it's not going to make this presentation. How can we start implementing things now? Number 2, how can we adapt some of the things that we've learned from research for people with Down syndrome, like my own adult age sister, Kristen, who has Down syndrome? What I recommend, I want to make sure poses no risk to people with Down syndrome, and importantly, I want to make sure it answers one or both of these 2 questions, which are the most frequent questions I'm asked by families who have loved ones with Down syndrome. Can we improve cognition in people with Down syndrome, or might there be a strategy that we could do right now in order to prevent Alzheimer's disease from setting in? Just to make sure we're all on the same page, people with Down syndrome have an increased chance of developing Alzheimer's disease. We really don't have any credible evidence showing people with Down syndrome develop Alzheimer's disease before the age of 35. But starting at the age of 40, 30 to 40% of people with Down syndrome start to develop Alzheimer's-related dementia. And by age 50, some studies suggest that nearly half of our loved ones with Down syndrome will develop dementia. We don't know which individuals will go on to develop Alzheimer's or not, but the point of this presentation is what are steps you could take right now for your loved one with Down syndrome, no matter what their age is, to potentially prevent that Alzheimer's from setting in your loved ones. I've developed all of the research and put it into what I'm calling SMART actions. SMART, of course, is an acronym that stands for socialize, move more, activate the brain, reduce sugar and eat well, and treat the co-occurring conditions. And I want to go through each one of these sections in brief to give you a sample of what you could practically do right now at home. Socialize. Let's start with the first section of our SMART actions, socializing. How is socializing related to brain health and cognition? Well, it has a lot to do with it. I promised you we would take a look at the research, so let's dive into this research study done of nearly 3,000 neurotypically developing adults who are between the ages of 62 and 90 living in the United States. The individuals who were at more risk for dementia when followed over time were those who had smaller social network sizes. These are individuals that had fewer friends and families in their lives. These are also individuals who had less community engagement. They were more likely to be alone. If there is increased reliance on fewer friends and fewer family members, these are individuals in the neurotypical population who are at higher risk for Alzheimer's disease. I have no reason to believe that the same wouldn't hold true for people with Down syndrome. The reason why friends and family actually prevent Alzheimer's are still unknown to neuroscientists, but we feel that it's the neurocognitive challenge, the conversations, the questions they ask, keeping our brain cells active and challenged that might be a benefit. Let's take a look at what social networks are. Neuroscientists are continuing to study this. If you look at this cartoon here, you see you have the patient in the middle who is connected to different people. The red lines are tight connections. You could see this is a patient who's really tightly connected to his wife and his nephew and a friend. And then the blue lines are those that are less tight connections. For example, this son may be adult and moved on and not as close to his father, but you could also see that friends and families are also interconnected. So there is this web, if you will, of interconnectivity. This is an example of something that is done in the neurotypical population by neuroscientists. Now I want you to look at this picture, but only see the lines, don't see the people. And neuroscientists then map all of us onto this grid. You can see in the upper left-hand corner, there's lots of space and few lines. These are individuals who have fewer friends and families and have a less dense social network. As you move down to the lower right part of the screen, you see a lot of nodes, a lot of connections, a tight spider web. These are people who have high density social networks. People who are in the upper left-hand corner are more prone to developing Alzheimer's disease. Those in the lower right-hand corner are more protective from. This is the neurotypical population. I have no reason to believe it's the same for people with Down syndrome. But if we're being honest, people with Down syndrome are more likely to be in the upper left-hand corner due to limitations and barriers from transportation, maintaining friendships, maintaining those connections. But it doesn't need to be that way. And this is where the homework starts to come in. People with Down syndrome are often listeners. So I will see them in the group, people will be talking, and people with Down syndrome will be hovering. They're there, they're paying attention, they're listening. But we need to engage them. The benefits of those social networks is being challenged by our friends with questions. We need to make people with Down syndrome think. I oftentimes see too in conversations what I call the trivia questions, where we want the person with Down syndrome to be involved in the conversation, but we almost quiz them with one-word answers. Tell them what you had for dinner last night, pizza. Tell them where you're going tomorrow, swimming. Those are factual retrieval questions, but that's not getting the benefit of the social engagement. Instead, we need to ask open-ended questions. Tell me about your day. What do you think we should do tomorrow? How do you think Grandma's feeling? Why is she feeling that way? Oftentimes, people with Down syndrome won't have ready answers, but we need to be patient. We need to give them time for their brains to generate those answers, and it will come. We need to have these deeper conversations and recognizing people with Down syndrome of all ages need to be challenged with those social networks. So your homework, I want you to time it. I want you to have a meaningful conversation with your loved one with Down syndrome for 5 minutes every day, because that is going to promote social networking and better brain health. My next recommendation is to cut the electronic cord. What does this mean? This means only one TV at most in your household. Now, I want to say anything I'm recommending here, my wife and I have also implemented. We have no TVs other than a small one in one small room, which we rarely access. Why? Because when we have TVs on, we become passive learners. We sit there and we watch and we're not engaged. But instead, when there's no TV there and we need to have family and friends, we're going to have conversations. For example, when my wife and I had lots of TV during dinner time, we would sit there, we wouldn't talk to each other, and we'd be watching the news, right? Now that the TV is out, when we're sitting at dinner, we have to talk to each other. We're challenging each other's brains. People with Down syndrome become dependent upon video games, dependent upon TV. There are so many other enriching ways that we can use that time to maximize. I am going to give you the challenge. Cut that electronic cord. Your whole household needs to be committed. No TV during dinner, only one TV in the whole house. There will be lots of other ways to be able to fill that time. And I'm going to give you some examples of how to do so. All right, we're now moving from S into the M category. The M category is moving more. What does moving more? That means exercise, physical exercise. Why is physical exercise important? It keeps our brains clean. There are cells in our brain called glial cells. These are cells that are responsible for cleaning up the junk, the plaques that are in our brain. Now, glial cells, as we start to age, get tired and they start not to do their job. And when they stop cleaning up, then those plaques start to accumulate, which might be part of the reason why Alzheimer's disease is developing. Now, how can we reboost and kick those glial cells back into gear? Exercise. Exercise, study after study shows, gets those glial cells to clean up the brain. I'm just going to show you a few of the many studies that are out there. This is a study that shows that exercise improves the adaptability of certain brain regions, what's known as neuroplasticity. Again, it cleans up those cells that are in the brain. And this was a study of 59 studies from 1947, we've known this, until 2009, put them all together and showed that those children who had more physical activity, neurotypically developing children, had better outcomes in school. And there's no reason to believe that people with Down syndrome shouldn't get that same benefit as well. And then what about adults? These looked at 29 different randomized controlled trials, the best research out there for adults, neurotypical adults. And those who had more aerobic exercise had better attention, better processing speed, and better executive and memory function. Again, the same should be true for people with Down syndrome. And it doesn't need to be big exercise. This is one of my favorite studies. 36 healthy college students, half of them sat on a stationary bike, those exercise bikes, and did nothing. And the other half just softly pedaled for 10 minutes. What they then had them do is when they were done with that, no matter what group they were in, they had to complete some computer memory tests while getting an MRI or a picture of their brain. Those who just softly pedaled for 10 minutes did better on the exercise test, and they lit up the centers on their brain around. Simple, soft pedaling is better than nothing. So if you say exercise is really impossible for my loved one with Down syndrome, we're not talking about going from nothing to a marathon. We're talking about increasing their exercise. Now, what should people with Down syndrome get? It should at least be the same, if not more, than their neurotypically developing counterparts. In the United States, our American Heart Association has come out with recommendations based on the latest research in physical fitness activity. Those who are 3 to 5 should be physically active through the day, and we start quantifying that starting at age 6. They should have at least 60 minutes of moderate to vigorous intensive activity. We're going to define that. The vigorous activity should be at least 3 days per week, and it should also include some weight-bearing activities in order to build the muscle and build the bone strength. When it comes to adults, these are neurotypically developing adults, but I would say at least this is the bottom threshold for people with Down syndrome. They need 150 minutes per week of moderate or 75 minutes per week of vigorous. And we want to also add that muscle building and strength activities at least 2 days per week. And we want to spend less time sitting and more time moving. And we want to increase those benefits even more and more as we advance. So what is moderate intensive activity? It's brisk walking, it's moving, it's water aerobic, it's gardening, it's bicycling, it's shooting baskets. Vigorous activity is you are breaking a sweat or you cannot have a conversation easily when you're doing some of these activities here. The average person with Down syndrome that we see in clinic doesn't even get moderate intensive aerobic activity. They might be involved in group sports, but oftentimes it's cheering, it's on the sidelines, it's having the social benefits of group activities, but not the athletic benefits of group activities. We need to get serious about physical fitness for people with Down syndrome. It is perhaps the best medicine to combat the future of Alzheimer's disease, and yet very few people with Down syndrome are getting the basics. So we know that Special Olympics is a wonderful opportunity for people with Down syndrome to benefit from the social experience. There are many elements of Special Olympics that do have that aerobic vigor, like track and field and like swimming. But if your son or daughter is signed up for Special Olympics, take note, are they reaching moderate or vigorous aerobic activity? If not, we need to look for additional augmentative ways to supplement. Not all people with Down syndrome sweat. So if you have someone who is not a sweater, we need to make sure we're cooling them down with waters and towels because we still want them to achieve that vigorous activity. Your homework, don't do anything special. I want you to record for 1 week how much cardiovascular exercise your loved one with Down syndrome is getting. Count those minutes down, compare them to the previous slides of the bare minimum. If they're not reaching them the bare minimum, you are not alone. But the challenge is to slowly get them up to getting that bare minimum to give them that cognitive boost and prevention. I want to go on to the third section, and that is activate the brain. As much as we need to physically move our bodies for the benefit, we need to mentally challenge our brains as well. This is for all of us. This was one study done of nearly 3,000 adults ages 65 and older from around the United States. None of them had Alzheimer's disease or evidence of cognitive decline at the beginning of the study. But the participants were randomized. Half of them got 10 sessions, 60 minutes at a time over 5 to 6 weeks of brain exercises, of little cognitive challenges, and the other half did not. They were then followed over time, and those individuals who just had those 10 sessions had better cognitive outcomes, not only when the study was done, but 10 years later when they were found, that the cognitive brain exercises had a statistically different significance in those who did them versus those who did not. And this is in neurotypically developing adults. And I have no reason to believe people with Down syndrome shouldn't benefit from some of the same brain exercises. Now, we could have lots of fun with this. People with Down syndrome oftentimes are graduating from an educational environment at age 18 or 22, depending on where they live around the globe. And sometimes when they graduate from school, that's when learning stops. People with Down syndrome are lifelong learners. They have the capacity to be the lifelong learners, but we need to continue to challenge their brains and their minds with exercises. And I'm talking about brain exercises. So how can we make it fun? We know people with Down syndrome like to please, they like to learn. So can we turn some of these brain exercises into games that could have a fun social component, or quite frankly, something they could do with their friends or their brothers and sisters, so it doesn't all fall on the caregivers who have loved ones with Down syndrome. So my challenge is I want all of you to play at least one memory game per week. Just make it part of what you do for your loved one with Down syndrome. And if you're looking for some ideas, here's a great website to be able to check out. But I want to give you some of my favorite ideas. And these are ideas where it doesn't involve lots of time, experience, or money to put this together. Let's say you're going somewhere and you're waiting for an appointment to begin, and you just pull out of your pocket some coins. So you and your loved one with Down syndrome could do the coin game. So I pull out 4 coins, I put them down. I asked my loved one with Down syndrome to take a look. Then I have them turn around. And when they turn around and come back, I scramble it up. And then they need to replace it in the order that it was that they saw it. And then you have to switch. So now it's the person with Down syndrome asking mom to do it. And you go back and forth, and you see who could really have fun with that coin game and who could memorize the most and remember the most. This is a seemingly simple game that could become very complex very quickly. So why not try 6 coins, then scramble them up and see if you can remember it. Or try coins that are all the same, but now it's versus the side. In America, we would call it heads or tails. You can make this very complicated very quickly, again, just with coins. This is something that I know people with Down syndrome oftentimes like costume and learn to dress up. I want you to take a look at me. And I would say, we're playing a game, take a look at me, take a look at me. Now I want you to turn around. You would turn around. I'm going to remove something. And then I'm going to have you look at me again. And I'm going to say, what did I change? And they look and they look and they look. And did you see it? Did you see it? It was my earmuffs. I took my earmuffs off, right? And this is a great game that they could go back and forth with their friends, removing one thing, and it forces them to have good perception, having fun, and again, utilizing their brain. This is another easy game. It just involves junk, quite literally junk. This is a picture of my desk. And I could ask my loved one with Down syndrome, I want you to take a look at my desk, all right? Then I'm going to have you turn your back. And when your back is turned, I'm going to remove something from my desk. And the question is, what did I remove from my desk? Can you see it? It were the keys, right? And then you have the person with Down syndrome, then they have a turn and you turn around. And this could become very complicated very soon. You could have small objects like paper clips. You could have lots of objects. They could all be the same objects, but what color are they? This is really, really fun. There are so many other memory games that are out there. And at the end of my talk, I'm going to give you a link and a course where you can find many, many more of them. Let's move on to R. R in SMART is reduce sugar and eat well. Why do we care about sugar? Study after study is showing that sugar could inflame the brain. This is more than 5,000 people who were followed over 10 years, and those who had higher blood sugars had a faster decline in cognition than those with normal blood sugars. And this was true for even people who did not have diabetes. Why is this true? Because when you consume sugar, insulin comes in and needs to store that sugar. Okay, so if we keep insulin occupied, insulin can't do other things in our body. What is one of the other things that insulin could do? It could activate the glial cells. Do you remember what those are? Those are those cells that clean up the garbage in our brain. Exercise could get them going, but also insulin has a secondary effect where it keeps those glial cells going. But if we're consuming the insulin by taking care of sugar, we're not getting the benefit of the clean brain. So the American Heart Association, again, has specific recommendations on how much sugar neurotypically developing people should be consuming. My suggestion is people with Down syndrome should have this or fewer grams of added sugar each day. Let's take a look at what this means. And your homework is for 1 week, do nothing special, but just record the amount of added sugar that your loved one with Down syndrome is consuming. And I bet you will be surprised that it's going to far exceed some of these counts. I was surprised with my own diet, and it took a lot of vigilance for me to be able to get it down fewer than these grams each day. All right, let's take a trip to the grocery store. So here's a grocery store in my neighborhood, and you see all of these different health bars, right? This is a bar that says it has antioxidants, it's going to be good for you, it's gluten-free, right? And I see so many of my patients come in and having this as a snack. But if we were to turn this over and we look here, there are 6 grams of added sugar. There's a total of 11 grams of sugar. This is not a snack, this is a candy bar, and your loved one with Down syndrome, by the simple 4 bites, has consumed nearly 1/4 of all the sugar they get throughout the day. This is something that is not good for people with Down syndrome. Well, let's take a look at yogurt. I see so many of my patients come in and, oh, Dr. Skotko, they're gonna have a healthy snack. They love yogurt. Well, let's take a look at this one. Oh, it's grass-fed, it's beautiful, it got strawberry, it's organic, it looks marvelous, until we flip that over and we look, 10 grams of added sugar. Person with Down syndrome consumes this snack, almost half their day is done. They've consumed the amount of sugar they can have for half that day. And again, it's adding up very, very quickly. And then you see some of these energy drinks. If we turn one of these energy drinks and we kind of zoom in, we see that there's a total of 53 grams of total sugar. And why there might be no added sugar, what is in here? It is 2 pulverized apples. It is a whole orange. It's a whole peach. It's a whole this. If you give someone with Down syndrome an apple, they're most likely going to take a couple of bites and move on. But if we pulverize it and take out all the fiber, it is just a pure sugar shot. Your insulin is boosting and we're not getting the benefits of that. These juices are not helpful. Obesity, we know, can also in and of itself contribute to cognitive decline for lots of reasons. It is important to know your son or daughter's body mass index. This is a calculation for how much they weigh based on how tall they are. We want people with Down syndrome to be under the 85th percentile on the neurotypical curves. Calculate your child where they are today and work hard to get there. Our last stop is on the T, treating medical conditions. There are some medical conditions that, if left untreated, can contribute to cognitive decline or perhaps Alzheimer's disease. We know that too little or too much thyroid can lead to cognitive changes. This is why all people with Down syndrome should have their thyroid checked annually. We also know obstructive sleep apnea occurs in nearly 75% of people with Down syndrome. Everyone with Down syndrome should have a sleep study by the age of 4 because it is so prevalent and oftentimes silent. But if your loved one with Down syndrome answers yes to any of these questions, they can and should get another sleep study. Why? This is a study that shows even mild obstructive sleep apnea, just a touch of obstructive sleep apnea, was associated with 9 lower points of IQ points in people with Down syndrome. We need to address and clean that up. We also know iron deficiency is the most single nutrient deficiency in the United States and around the globe in neurotypically developing individuals, and particularly for people with Down syndrome who tend to be picky eaters. We need to see if they are iron deficient by getting these tests, and if they are, improving dietary intake and oftentimes improving the absorption with the addition of a piece of fruit. These are foods that are rich in iron, and I guarantee people with Down syndrome are on that. We don't need to overdo iron. We just need to make sure they're not deficient. There are so many medical conditions that can and need to be treated in people with Down syndrome. If you haven't listened to my other talk called Down Syndrome Clinic to You as part of this World Down Syndrome Congress, please check out that talk or go to dsc2u.org, where we've just launched a virtual platform so you can get the latest advances in medical care for your loved one with Down syndrome in English or Spanish, no matter where you are around the globe. Just to review, we've taken smart steps today. We've socialized. People with Down syndrome need to move more. They need to activate the brain. They need to reduce sugar and eat well. And they also need to treat medical issues. Now, this was such a quick presentation based on all the information you're getting today at the World Down Syndrome Congress. There is more to this. And there's so much more, and I'm so dedicated. I created a micro website for this called Down Syndrome Brain Train. If you go to Down Syndrome Brain Train right now, you could sign up and you will get the latest information as I start to digest it and beam it out. And by signing up, you'll also get access to 3 free videos to get you started in order to make this a full lifestyle change for your loved one with Down syndrome. But if you want the full course, you could go to my full course on Vimeo called Down Syndrome Brain Train, where for $49, you will have access to all of my in-depth courses where I give you more exercises, more challenges, more research on each one of the SMART topics for you to be able to have that. And once you sign up, those videos are yours for a lifetime. I want to thank you all for tuning in. Let's continue to work hard together to make sure our loved ones with Down syndrome remain healthy and well. Happy brain training.